Welcome to episode 4 of Let's Rage Together, a podcast where two friends talk about the politics of total liberation and related topics.
We annihilated the world before your very ears.
You can't handle the truth.
Welcome to the 4th episode of Let's Rage Together. I'm Taryn.
And I'm Pete.
And this is the Rage and Recreation Mashup. It's been a while since our last episode, so today we'll be discussing a whole range of things, from an interesting listener question to plastic pollution to our travels and what we've been up to.
If this is the first time you've joined us, thanks. And please check out our Facebook page, Instagram. Both of them are just at Let's Rage Together podcast, and our website, letsragetogether.co.za. You can listen to all of our previous episodes on there, or on iTunes, Podbean, or wherever else you listen to podcasts.
Yeah, and you might also notice that we now have a Patreon page, so you can check out patreon.com/Let's Rage Together, or just the support section of our site. And if you want to help us out for even $1 a month, we'd really appreciate it. We could really use some better gear, which would help us record and edit a lot quicker and be able to send you some glorious sounding waves into your ears a little more frequently and at a better quality.
We aren't ever going to be selling advertising or anything like that on our podcast. We don't get any money or incentives from anything or anyone we mention, so any help would be greatly appreciated. We have a few rewards at different tiers, so you can check those out, like Taryn said, at patreon.com/Let's Rage Together, or click through to it from our website or the About section of our Facebook page to see what the tiers and rewards are. We're pretty stoked on the stuff we came up with.
So if you've listened to previous episodes, you'll know that we usually have a segment called The Bad and the Rad, where we discuss a few things that each of us like and dislike that don't necessarily warrant an entire episode, but that we just want to mention. But today we figured we'd just skip that segment and dive right into the good stuff.
So the first thing we are going to discuss is a question sent in from one of our listeners, Rich, who lives in Amsterdam, who sent in a really interesting question, which we thought we'd discuss. T, would you mind reading it for us?
So Rich wrote in saying, I feel like there are too many problems to try deal with them all together, or even one at a time. What would be your prescribed way to live? So if someone was keen to make a change, but not keen to delve into all of the whys and why not, how could they live? Could someone, without knowing all of the problems, live a certain way to help eradicate a bunch of problems? I don't even know if that's a question or if it raises more problems than it solves. And if there was a set of steps to take to living a kick-ass, save the world and make it awesome lifestyle, what would those be? Perhaps relying on certain people and trusting them and what they say to do about it to solve issues or parts of the issues, and taking on other issues ourselves, we could all aim to fix the world.
So quite an in-depth question, which I think is made up of a whole bunch of questions and ideas.
Yeah.
But thanks, Rich. It gave us a lot to think about, and we've discussed it quite a lot between ourselves. So T, do you think we should break the question down into parts?
Yeah, let's break it down into one question at a time. So the first part that Rich asked basically was, do we try to deal with all the problems together or one at a time?
So the way I would answer this is, we can't deal with all the problems together. So I think it's important that we just do what we can where we are with what we have.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. And I think in reality, none of us have the time or the energy or the brain capacity to know everything about everything. So I think the emphasis should be on critically analyzing your own behaviors and impacts, which includes the industries and people that you support in some way, and actively looking for ways to improve. Because you can't tackle everything at once, because none of us could possibly even grasp the magnitude or extent of all the problems that need to be addressed in the world. And that's without even considering the interconnection between any of these issues. So I think the best thing is to just start, like you said, Pete, start where you are with what you have, and do what you can to address whatever problems you might be contributing to.
Yeah, I think finding out all of the problems and all of the nuances of each of them will just be debilitating and make you feel overwhelmed.
Yeah, I don't think it's even possible. I mean, I'm sure there's things that we're contributing to every day that are horrendous and we don't even realize it.
So what do you think the next question could be?
So the next part of Rich's question is, what would be your prescribed way to live? So what would you say, Pete?
Well, I think firstly, both of us are pretty outspoken vegans. And so we believe that at the bare minimum, you should adopt a vegan lifestyle, I guess, as a first point.
Yeah, I think a lot of people see this as quite a big ask, and they see veganism as this big mountain of a commitment. but it's really just an inaction. By being vegan, you're not really doing anything. You're just no longer contributing to those industries. And it's such a small way to make less of a negative impact that I struggle to understand how people can even attempt to oppose veganism sometimes. I mean, I can understand the social and psychological barriers to making behavior changes, but honestly, it's the most basic thing you could do to reduce harm in multiple areas at once.
Yeah, that's why I get annoyed with sometimes when people say they're proud to be vegan or something, because it's really like the bare minimum we can do. We don't need to be contributing to all of this shit. Also, just don't be a dick. Just be a decent, considerate person.
Yeah, and this is something that we actually speak about a lot. It would go such a long way if people just adopted the basic principle to just not be shitty to other people and animals.
Yeah, I would say also get active. It would be great to just be able to make personal choices and live your life for yourself. But unfortunately, I think it's just not good enough. Things are too desperate and urgent for us to be passive, and bad things are being done all the time on a massive scale. And I think it's important to not just be passively non-contributing, but to actually get active in some way.
Yeah, I agree. And I think especially for those of us who hold some position of privilege, we have a moral obligation to give a damn. Ignorance is really only bliss for the privileged, because if you're not in a privileged position, you don't actually have much option a lot of the time. So some people don't have the option to look the other way or to be unaffected by certain problems because it's their daily lived struggle. If you have some level of privilege, you have a moral obligation to use that privilege for the benefit of others. And that said, it's impossible, again, to know everything or to always be an amazing human. We'll all mess up daily, probably in a multitude of ways, but we need to just try and be less shit, like you said, and try and learn from others as we go, I guess.
Yeah, and can we just pause for a second and recognize the sentence you said, ignorance is only bliss for the privileged. That's amazing. Well done. I love that. Then I guess the last point I could think of is maybe we don't need to reproduce.
Yeah, I think, the idea that this should be a norm is completely ridiculous. And that's not to hate on people who have chosen to have kids or already have kids or whatever. But I have a serious problem with the unquestioning expectation that all people should just breed. I often wonder how many people have kids just because it's the next step in the social ladder to achieving their white picket fence and 2.5 kids. Perfect happy life kind of thing. And how many actually consider the impacts and the reasons for wanting to procreate. Just saying, oh, babies are so cute, I want one, is really not a good enough reason to breed.
Why are we making more humans when we are already so overpopulated? I don't
Because
know.
it's a special gift, Pete. Special gift to carry on your unique and impressive, amazing genes.
Okay, before we offend everyone, should we move on to the next part of Richard's question?
Yes. So the next part of Richard's question is, if someone wanted to live a better life, but not get too much into the decision, how could they live?
I have a problem with this idea because of but not get too much into the decision part. It gives me kind of a lazy vibe. Like, I think that people should educate themselves and decide for themselves. I think it's kind of lazy and submissive to just want to be told what to do.
I'm kind of in two minds about this. I tend to agree with you on some level, but I think we should somehow find a balance where we should educate others where possible about topics that we understand. We should learn from others where possible, and we should also just trust people sometimes where it's possible and logical to do so, because we can't possibly know everything, as we said, and it's worth finding people that you can trust to give you kind of a 5-minute summary of why option B might be better than your default option A in an area of life that you're mostly ignorant about. Especially areas where you're not ever going to be an expert or you're not ever going to have enough information to make an informed decision. I think it's worthwhile looking for people in your life that you can trust, that you know they're going to give you a good perspective and they're educated on the topic, and they can just say to you in very simple terms, this is why this is a better option for you, and you can just trust them, because to try and learn about everything is just impossible.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think I'd kind of take back what I said, because if you have a friend that finds out this clothing brand uses sweatshop labor, you shouldn't buy them anymore. I think it's almost like that's a really cool thing for them to tell you so that you can decide, okay, I'm not going to contribute to that, versus just not telling you and leaving it up to you to go figure it out.
Yeah, and even in that regard, being able to find the people that you can trust their opinion without having to double check them. So some people, if you know they've read up a lot, they're not going to just believe anything. That you don't have to be like, oh, okay, this brand uses switch up labor. Let me research for myself before I decide. That's a waste of time. If you know your friend has done research properly, not scientific research, I'm talking about just, finding information, then you can kind of trust them. The only thing I think we need to be really careful of, though, is the halo effect. Even if someone is an expert in one area, it doesn't make them an expert in another area necessarily. Just be careful of respecting someone's opinion too much because of an authority that they have in one field.
Yeah, so I guess it ties into what I said about not being lazy. So you still decide who to trust, what information to take in, and then act on that. Like I've met people, for example, who don't want to be vegan because they say, oh, I don't know enough about it. But I think in that kind of sense, if it's a compassionate choice, why not just err on the side of like the compassionate versus not doing anything because you don't know enough? Because I think there are too many issues to ever know. So you do sometimes just have to trust people.
So I don't think there'll ever be a formula for living the most ethical, best, amazing life. But maybe there can be some kind of formula for, like you say, judging reliable sources of information and ways of gathering lots of useful information in the shortest amount of time possible without just being a passive follower of the masses.
Exactly. Cool. So what's the next part that Richard said?
Rich also said, is it possible to live in an ethical way without knowing all of the problems?
I guess no one really knows what a truly ethical life looks like. And I don't think there is a way to know all of the problems. We can only do, like I said, the best we can, where we can with what we have, and just be constantly educating ourselves and learning and growing.
Okay, then Rich also basically said, are there a set of steps to take for living an ethical life?
I think we mentioned some already, but maybe just start with don't be a dick.
Yeah, that's a pretty basic first step. And I think also in terms of just generally living an ethical life to the best of your knowledge, I think it's important to try and see things from the perspective of others, especially those that are exploited or oppressed in some way or in some way being victimized. And I feel like that is the quickest way to judge whether what you're doing is good or bad. If there is someone at the end of that decision that's being violated in some way, you should probably stop doing that. Like the example you used about veganism, there are animals dying at the end of that decision to not be vegan. So if you can avoid that, think of it from the perspective of the animal. They don't want to have their throat slit. So err on the side of caution, go vegan, and then research as much as you want.
Yeah.
If there's somebody being exploited or possibly being exploited, like if there is a query around sweatshop workers or something like that, think of their perspective. Err on the side of caution and avoid that exploitation if you can.
Yeah, I think a decision stops being personal when there's a victim attached. So I agree with you.
So we touched on this a bit earlier, but Rich is also just asking basically, should we have kind of ethical experts or people that we can rely on and trust to tell us how we should live? I think we kind of covered this, but is there anything you want to add? Again,
I think we shouldn't be lazy, but you can decide what to trust. I mean, how I read that part of Richard's question was like, do you think we should have mainstream ethical experts that can kind of guide the masses without them having to do any research themselves? So I personally am very skeptical of this. We kind of already have these people. Like if you look at people like Al Gore or Leonardo DiCaprio or something, if you think of the mainstream kind of ethical experts, and I just think things are worse than they've ever been. So I don't really think so.
Yeah, I kind of disagree that we do have experts, but I get what you're saying, that you read it as mainstream, not experts, but people that the masses kind of look up to. I think we need to be a lot more critical about who we view as experts. I think a lot of the time the opinions that are followed are not really great opinions to follow, which again comes down to the halo effect.
Yeah, I mean, one of the problems that I have with mainstream ethical experts is that they cannot say anything even remotely radical, because then people won't listen. It's like, instead of doing this thing, let's do this thing, have a 5-minute shower instead of a 10-minute shower.
Yeah.
It's oh, maybe we should reduce our meat consumption. And it's unfortunately just too urgent for that.
I think part of this, and it ties into these kind of experts, because I don't think you can call Leonardo DiCaprio an expert on ethics.
No, I mean, I don't know
he's
who
an
to.
actor. Like,
I don't know who to think of. I don't know like who these.
I don't know what
mainstream-
other qualifications he has, but I'm pretty sure he's not like a professor of ethics or anything.
What? Okay.
But again, it boils down to things like the halo effect. And I think if we just, aside from all the other points we've raised, if education just included critical thinking and like psychology 101, we'd already be much better off. Instead of people following celebrities for the sake of celebrity culture, if they actually were able to critically analyze their own thinking and the shit that they're hearing in the media, already we'd be better off.
I completely agree.
Just teach people how to think.
Yeah, think critically.
Yeah. Basic logic and reasoning.
I think at the moment that's not encouraged because you're just trying to make people who can contribute to the economy, people who can join the army, people who follow.
Yeah. So the last part of Rich's question, what would be a solution to fixing the world?
Yeah, I guess this is the gist of what he was asking. So if I had to give basically a list of quick steps, I would say eradicate humanity, be vegan, don't reproduce, grow your own food, try live a zero waste lifestyle, let's share with each other, and don't be a dick.
I guess if we eradicate humanity, like nobody's going to be reproducing. So that's kind of...
Oh, true. Two
for
steps in one.
Actually, just step one, eradicate humanity. The rest just follows.
Cool.
That's pretty zero waste.
Cool, guys. Pro-mortalism. Let's go.
Not really. We don't want everyone to die.
No.
Well, no. So I'm not even going to try to answer this. I think it's way too complicated. The idea of fixing the world just seems completely unrealistic to me right now. And I do go through patches where I'm also a little nihilistic.
I think both of us do.
Yeah, I think most people do who are involved in any kind of social justice, anything. But I think on an individual level, just be accountable, check your privilege, very importantly, be cool to people and other animals, and do stuff that's actually meaningful.
Yeah.
I think we all need to realize that we're going to die soon, and most of what we're told matters really, really doesn't. So I think it's a good idea to just try and be someone that adds to things like justice or happiness or empathy or equality, not stuff, materialism and all of the crap that we're told to value.
Narcissism.
Yes. And I think we could all just really benefit from being a lot less self-absorbed.
Definitely.
Like none of us really matter in the greater scheme of things. And if we can just be mindful of how many things are exponentially bigger and more important than ourselves, that's a pretty good start.
Yeah, I agree with you. So yeah, thanks Rich for sending us such a great question. That was really interesting to talk about.
Yeah, hopefully we gave a little bit of perspective that was interesting in some way, or
hopefully it wasn't too depressing.
Yeah.
If anyone has anything else they'd like us to discuss or answer, or if you have an episode topic suggestion or anything else, you can drop us an email on letsragetogetherpodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah, or even if you feel like we answered Rich's question horribly and you have a different perspective, or you want to add to what we said, we'd love to hear what you think about it as well, because we want to be better humans and we want to learn from all of you and your ideas. So part of the reason it's been so long since we released an episode is that we've both been pretty busy and have done a little bit of traveling, especially Pete. So Pete, tell us what you've been up to.
So I was recently in the UK for a month and then in Hong Kong for a month. I met up with Taryn in the UK, but only in the second half. So I went to the UK about 2 weeks before she did and stayed with some friends there and got to do some cool things. So I got to see Reviver, which are a really cool band from the States. If anyone's into like energetic kind of pop punk that have lyrics all about gender equality and cool politics, check them out. Got to visit All Ages Records, which is a really cool punk and hardcore record store in Camden Town. I got to visit South Bank, which is a really famous skate spot that I've wanted to visit since I was a kid. If anyone's ever played any of the Tony Hawk's Pro Skaters, or basically ever picked up a skateboarding magazine, you'll know what South Bank is. I got to see a lot of street art and graffiti. Well, even with Taryn, I saw a bunch. So even including works from Banksy, Shepherd Ferry, Space Invader, Dalek, Shock One, my personal favorite, Roa, and tons of political art everywhere. From there, I went to a place called Hull, which is like northeast England. and I stayed with my friend Ben. You should follow his art on Instagram. His handle is Not Long Left Now. I also got to meet up and have lunch with Ellen, one of our listeners from the UK, which was really cool.
What's up, Alan?
Hey, Ellen. And yeah, basically after Hull, I got a train to King's Cross, London, and met up with Taryn.
Yeah, I just want to say, coming from South Africa, we have very few options for vegan restaurants and just generally good vegan food. And the UK, if you're from the UK listening to this, you are so lucky.
Honestly.
Because there is just so much vegan food. Like wherever we were, there was always at least a restaurant or multiple restaurants with vegan options.
Yeah, I mean, I would
Everywhere.
just, anywhere we were, I could open my Happy Car app, and within 1 kilometer, there would be like 10 vegan restaurants.
Yeah, we could just walk and get amazing vegan food everywhere.
Everywhere. But
So count your blessings.
can we just have a moment of silence for Vigo bars?
Yes. Vigo bars. Vigo bars are probably my favorite thing in the UK.
Just so everyone knows, Taryn does not say absolutes,
Never.
ever.
I don't have favorites. I don't like to use extremes of any kind of preference. But Vigo bars,
Hands down, the best chocolates on earth.
in the world ever. And also they're on the Food Empowerment Project recommended chocolate list.
And they're fair trade.
Yes.
So really cool.
yeah, eat all of the Vigo bars if
Yeah.
you're in the UK. Or if you go to the UK or anywhere in Europe, just buy
Yeah.
them because they're delicious.
They come out of Germany, so they'll be all over Europe.
Yeah. Then aside from Vigo bars, we also went to this really, really cool vegan cafe called Black Cat, which Pete's actually been to twice. It's a worker-run cooperative, and it's just really rad.
It's amazing. I personally love veganism with politics included. So it's used as like a meeting space. They've got a bunch of posters on the wall that are like adjusted hardcore posters that are actually the names of the like menu items. And the food is great. And it's just got a really cool like DIY activist vibe about it. So
Yeah,
I
it's
really,
really cool.
I really love spaces like that.
And you got a pretty rad zine for us there as
Yeah.
well.
I picked up the Agitator fanzine, which is a new like animal liberation zine from the UK. So if you can find that, check them out.
Yeah, really cool little zine.
Also, before Taryn arrived, I got to go to a place called the Norman's Coach and Horses, which was London's first vegan and vegetarian pub, which has been around since 1847.
That's
So
amazing.
pretty old. Not that I drink or anything, so I'm not into pubs exactly, but it was cool to visit, and they serve vegan, typical British food. So I had like tofu fish and chips, and it was
Did you have mushy peas?
and mushy peas. Yeah,
Gross.
I'm not really a fan of that.
Yeah, I've never thought that sounds appealing at all.
We also got to go to probably my favorite place to eat in the UK, Temple of Satan in Camden.
Best food ever.
Just have to say thanks so much to Gijs.
Yeah.
You're a champion, dude.
Yeah, we tasted pretty much everything. We had the normal burger. I think you had the chicken style burger
Yeah,
or something.
the Temple Burger.
Yeah.
It is incredible.
Mac and cheese. Little, what were those?
The barbecue wings.
Barbecue wings. Man, so good.
Holy shit. I cannot recommend eating at Temple of Satan enough.
Yes, just go there and spend all your money. It's worth it. Then we also went to London's first vegan bakery called Miss Cupcake. Such an amazing cupcake place. If anyone knows me semi-well, they'll know that I'm a bit of a cupcake snob. Miss Cupcake, oh my goodness.
It's amazing.
So good.
Totally worth it.
Yeah, really, really amazing vegan cupcakes.
There's also a great donut shop called Dough Society, which you should check out for massive donuts that will make you feel sick, but totally worth it. Basically, Europe. Well done.
Yeah, so we ate a lot of food, probably way too much, but we did also do some other stuff. We didn't just eat. In London, I also went to an activist demo, which was quite cool. Met a couple of people that I've only known online, and it was pretty cool to see how things are done in the UK versus what we do in South Africa. And yeah, it was cool to get to do some activism while we were there as well. Aside from all the food and the little bit of activism, the main reason we actually went to the UK was for Outbreak Fest to watch a bunch of bands, which was really cool.
Yeah, so we basically combined Outbreak Fest and the Great Yorkshire Vegan Fest, which happened at the same time while we were in Leeds. pretty much we would eat food all morning and then go watch bands the rest of the day until like midnight.
Yeah, basically the best kind of day you can have.
Yeah. We also went to the Outbreak Fest pre-fest. So some of the highlight bands that we saw, including the pre-fest, were Insist, amazing youth crew, really fast youth crew
Yeah,
kind of
really
music. Protester, Line of Sight, Code Orange, the heaviest band I've ever seen in my life.
And can I just say, Line of Sight, I think, was probably my favorite set of Outbreak Fest.
Oh, I would agree. I think actually they were probably the best band we saw that whole time. And we got to watch two old bands, cro-mags and Floor Punch, which were both incredible to see. Feel like really lucky to have watched those bands.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, all of these bands were incredible. And then, of course, Turnstile always have a really entertaining set.
The only thing I didn't really like about Outbreak Fest was that it was very packed at one stage. And they only had about 5 food vendors. And we were really excited to try some of the food. But the lines were so long.
Yeah.
I was getting so hangry all the time because we would really work up an appetite and then have to go wait for over an hour.
I mean, the food really wasn't that great, to be honest. And it was really expensive.
I think some of it was okay, but it was really, really expensive. And the one meal we got was really not great.
And it was small.
And when you're converting to rands, wow,
Yeah.
we got ripped off in a big way. I was very much not impressed.
Yeah, generally it was cool. I just think at times it felt like there were way too many people. But yeah, and then we also got to watch H2O at Underworld when we were not part of Outbreak Fest, but when we were in London.
Yeah, if you've ever been to an H2O show, you'll know that it's the stage presence and energy and everything is just amazing.
All of these bands were incredible though, on another level.
Yeah, for sure.
The Great Yorkshire Vegan Festival was also pretty cool. We ate tons of good food there. We got the VIP tickets so that we wouldn't have to wait in the line and we could quickly move between the Great Yorkshire Vegan Fest and the Outbreak Fest. So we got a cool goodie bag with treats and stuff. One of the things I was really looking forward to there was watching a talk by hunt saboteurs, because I've been really interested in that, especially in South Africa where there's a lot of hunting, to see if somehow we could do anything like that here. But it was really disappointing to go there only for no one to arrive to do the talk.
Yeah, we sat there for quite a while and no one showed up.
Probably after 15, 20 minutes, the people who were doing the Hunt Sabs table came and spoke, even though they didn't even know who was going to be speaking.
Yeah, I think it was a different organization that was supposed to be speaking. And they just kind of filled in last minute, which was really cool of them to do.
Yeah.
So it was cool to hear a little bit about how they operate. But I mean, they hadn't prepared anything or, which isn't their fault. But it would have been really nice to have a proper presentation on the topic.
Yeah. Otherwise, what did you think of the Great Yorkshire Vegan Fest in general?
I thought it was really cool, but it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. I thought compared to like South African markets and things like that, I thought it would be much, much better. And in a way it was. But there was a lot of the same sort of stuff that we have at home. Lots of the crystal type stuff. Lots of like vegan clothing that's really badly designed and
really expensive.
Yeah. Like lots of cool products though, which was cool to see. Really good food for the most part. But also it was pretty much the same stalls on both days. So I feel like we could have just gone to one day.
Yeah, I agree.
But overall it was pretty cool. It wasn't like mind-blowingly amazing.
Yeah, I mean, the food was the highlight. I would have loved to have some more activist stalls. As far as I remember, there was only really Sea Shepherd and the Hunt Sabs.
Yeah, and then like a couple of other NGOs and stuff.
I feel like they could have had some speakers maybe.
Well, there were speakers, but not really. I feel like there could have been a lot more political elements added.
Yeah.
And like more academic speakers maybe.
They also screened Forks Over Knives, which I think, what's the point of that? What the health has come out.
But even that, I mean, it's a vegan fest. Most people that go there are vegan. I find it difficult to understand why any screenings like that happen at these fests. I mean, I get it, like some people who haven't seen the documentary will want to see it. But Forks Over Knives is firstly really, really old. And secondly, why are you screening all these documentaries to vegans?
Yeah, exactly.
We already know.
You're already preaching to the choir.
Yeah, organize screenings where the public can go. I don't know. Maybe they get a lot of non-vegans going through it. I don't know. Yeah,
but I agree. I think we could have just gone to the one day
and
just kind of hung out and eaten some food and it would have been okay.
Yeah.
I really, really love that in the UK, all the museums are free.
I think we both agree that any kind of education or information that can be free should be free.
Yeah.
So it's cool that you can go to these really, really rad museums for free everywhere.
Yeah.
Science
all over
Museum,
the place.
Natural History, all of those.
We also checked out some cool bookstores. Foyles is incredible, even though it's a mainstream bookshop. Their flagship store, I can't remember where it was, Soho, I think. It's massive, like 6 floors. And we found some really good books there. They have a whole radical section, feminist section, anarchist section. And it was cool checking out 2 radical bookstores while we were there, Houseman's and Freedom Press.
Both very, very cool.
Yeah, that was really a cool highlight to stand outside Freedom Press, like such an old anarchist institution. And then there's a cool bookshop. I don't know where it is exactly.
It's in Camden.
In Camden, called Word on the Water, with this cool old guy who's converted his boat into a bookshop.
Yeah,
And
it's really cool.
This is a cool experience.
And it's got a lot of really cool titles as well. It's tiny, but there's some really good finds in there.
Yeah, so we both came back with much heavier bags after visiting these bookshops.
Yeah. And then another really cool thing we got to see was we went to Battersea Park and we saw the brown dog statue.
So hard to find.
For those of you who don't know what the brown dog statue is, just look up the Brown Dog Affair. There was a big kind of anti-vivisection campaign, and the brown dog was essentially a dog that was tested on extensively in a very cruel way. And yeah, if you want to read more about the story, just search the Brown Dog Affair. And ironically, just the same way that vivisection is very well hidden even today, it was really, really hard to find the statue in the park. You have to go through these little pathways in this foresty kind of area before you find it.
Yeah, it's even hidden in this little alcove, basically in a bush.
I think the majority of people that go there don't even know that it's there.
No.
But it was really cool to see that.
Yeah, so check that out, the Brown Dog Affair. So the UK is pretty cool and everything, but do you think there were any bad things while we were there?
There's always bad things.
I think the most personally irritating thing was the Harry Potter trolley at King's Cross.
Oh my gosh. If anyone listening loves Harry Potter, I'm sorry, but geez.
When I met Taryn there were probably at least 50 people waiting in the line to pay £9.50 to get a photo holding a half of a trolley cut off, stuck in a wall. And it's not even at platform 9 3/4. It's just
it's not
in
on
a
the
wall.
platform. They've just put a trolley there to say, oh, this isn't platform 9 3/4, and people are paying exorbitant amounts of money.
Yeah.
They get like a little scarf and a wand that they can pose with.
Yeah, you can't keep it. You just pose with this half of a trolley stuck
You
in the wall.
could buy a Vigo bar instead,
Yeah.
guys.
You could buy multiple Vigo bars, I think.
Anyway, so the other weird thing that we experienced was while we were in London, we went to this vegan outreach event because we did want to do a bit more activism while we were there. And we just saw this event on Facebook and we decided to go check it out. And it was just a Meat is Murder vegan outreach table type thing. So we went there not really knowing what to expect, and it was really weird.
Yeah, so we arrived and there was this tiny little table. It had a tray showing some like milks and vegan alternatives.
I think there was like vegan cheese or something.
Yeah, and then a bunch of literature. And basically we asked, hey, can we help you guys? Can we join in? And they just gave us some leaflets.
And some of the leaflets were a little bit questionable to me.
Yeah, I agree.
Some of the literature was good and some of it was very single issue, or
it seemed
there wasn't a clear vegan message in a lot of it.
Exactly. They had also done a bunch of chalking around where we were standing. And most of it was good, but the one was really weird. It had a snake drawn and it said underneath, milk snakes, not cows. So I turned to this guy who was standing close to me and I said, hey, like, what is this chalk thing? I don't get it. And he said, oh, there's a type of snake called a milk snake. So then I thought, oh, okay, like that's clever, milk snakes, like don't milk cows.
Yeah.
But then
And he thought it was pretty funny, it seemed. He was like, that's so clever, right?
Yeah, he thought it was clever. So then I said, oh, okay, cool. So it's a type of snake. And he says, yes, but it's also fine to milk snakes. And there's nothing unethical about it. So I said, what do you mean? And he's like, oh, I milk snakes venom for a living to
Like
make
for
anti-venom.
Yeah.
And then he got, in my opinion, pretty aggressively defensive.
He was super defensive. He was like, we didn't even ask. He was just like, I do this for a living and there's nothing unethical about it. And we were like, okay, we haven't even said there's anything unethical about it, even though there is. But it was super weird.
So basically it was like a vegan outreach thing where he's saying, we should milk snakes instead of milking cows,
Yeah.
which is like blatantly speciesist.
Yeah, and I mean, I get that maybe there's no alternative right now for anti-venom, but to actively promote that, like whether there's an alternative right now or not, that's weird, man.
It just seemed to me a very strange thing to have at a vegan outreach thing.
Yeah, and it was weird because aside from the weird snake milking guy, there was no instruction or anything. We didn't even get to speak to the organizer. I think she was talking to someone when we arrived. But there didn't seem to be any guidance as to what kind of vegan messaging they were using. They weren't screening any of the volunteers in any way. There wasn't any structure. And I don't really like to criticize people who are trying to do something. Like, it's cool that they were there and they were trying to do something to educate people. But I also felt like they had no control over what the volunteers were saying and doing. And we were literally just handing out flyers, which to me is not very effective. Maybe it is. Maybe some people read the pamphlets and gain something from it. But I felt like there was no real communication with people walking past. And it was such a missed opportunity because it was a really, really busy place where I think if you had a more effective form of activism happening, you could reach a lot of people in a short amount of time. And I felt like we were just standing there trying to force people to take flyers.
Which side note, I was completely unsuccessful at.
Pete is so bad at getting people to take flyers from him.
I literally didn't give one person a flyer. No one would take anything from me.
No, I think he did get one.
People looked at you and they just took all your flyers. What's wrong with me that people see me and they're like, I mean, you've told me before, I have a stabby vibe.
You do sometimes. I feel like you're a little bit intimidating to people, maybe.
So I will not be doing leafleting as a form of activism because I actually just suck at it.
It's not a strong suit of yours, Pete.
Thanks.
Yeah, so aside from the kind of weird activism that we came across, another really heavy bad thing in the UK that we both noticed was the amount of suicides or attempted suicides on the underground.
While we were there, within the space of a week, there were 3.
Yeah.
So that felt really heavy. And I did some reading up on it. And Vice has an article where they interview a member of the Samaritans, people who deal with train suicides. And some of the stats are pretty intense. They said someone commits suicide on Britain's railway network every 31 hours. And between 2016 and 2017, 273 people died by suicide on Britain's railways. So, I mean, it's really intense, but, you know, what can we do about this?
Well, firstly, I think, suicide is a pretty hectic reality everywhere and by all methods. But one thing that struck me was just the way that people are so accustomed to it. Yeah. And previously when I was in the UK, I had heard, person on the tracks or some of the other euphemisms that they use. And I'd often wondered, is someone just kind of messing around on the tracks or, doing something stupid, or is it actually a suicide? And, after we were talking about this, I had looked up a little bit about it as well. And person on the tracks is definitely a euphemism for an attempted suicide or person under the train. When we were on the train the one day, they just said there was a delay. And about 5 minutes later, they said there was a person on the tracks. And what struck me was how people just aren't even affected. They just carry on. They swarm out of the train because it's just an inconvenience.
Yeah.
They're so used to it. And I guess they have to. They have to kind of desensitize themselves to the fact that this is a reality. It happens. Carry on with your day. But I felt so heavy after that.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, we heard about 3 incidences, but the one really kind of hit me pretty hard because we were waiting in the train
like the
when
station
they announced
before.
it. Yeah, the station before, and they had said they're closing the whole line. And the way people just carried on with their day felt so heavy to me because I thought, yeah, sure, you can't just mourn this person you don't know every time you hear this if it's happening every 31 hours. But at the same time, someone's just lost their relative. Yeah. Someone just thought that there was no other option for them.
So I think maybe the problem is kind of a mental health issue, but also a public attitude towards mental health. Maybe it's about public education and destigmatizing things like suicide and poor mental health. Maybe there's just not adequate mental health care. And so that's why so many people are killing themselves.
Well, when I was reading afterwards, it seems like they do have really good programs in terms of the staff being trained in terms of how to react if someone does jump onto the tracks. And they seem to have a lot of follow-up trauma counseling and that sort of thing, which I think is much better than anything we probably would have here. But I think you're right about destigmatizing mental health and suicide in general worldwide. Not just, I mean, this is just apparent to us and it's happening everywhere all the time by different methods. But I think in this case, it's just because it's in your face and you're hearing about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's really in your face because some of the newer stations, they've put up these glass like fences to stop people having access to the track. So the train stops in line with the doors to stop people killing themselves. It's so heavy to even be there and experience that. And then I feel like there's also an issue with our like phone, social media, individualist culture. You mentioned, you know, if you saw someone who looked like they were going to kill themselves, maybe you could pull them away or something, but I feel like no one really notices anyone else because when you're waiting on the platform, everyone is just looking down at their phone.
And it's so busy that people aren't really noticing. And actually, after we were speaking about this, I remember we kind of paid attention at the next platform. What would we do if someone here was thinking about it, or how would we notice? And the thing is, so many people are waiting so close to the end of the tunnel, you wouldn't be able to get to them in time. There are so many people rushing to get the next train or whatever. There's actually no way that you can tell unless somebody is sitting at the edge looking like they're about to jump. But I don't think you would notice. I think especially when people get to the point where they're ready to commit suicide, they have lost so much hope that I don't think you would necessarily notice because they've just hit that point where it's just like they've given up. So it's a really difficult thing to kind of tackle. But at the same time, I find it bizarre that they're spending so much money and resources to build these glass panels to block people from getting onto the tracks, which is a good public safety initiative. But why are those resources not being spent in mental health first?
Because
maybe they are, but
I don't think it's for people. They don't give a shit. I think that they're just trying to not make things inconvenient and delay the running of the economy.
I guess maybe in terms of the people running the underground, it is just let's make this efficient and safe because it's a public safety hazard. But yeah, I guess somewhere along the line, resources should be spent on mental health.
Yeah, I mean, that was a heavy part of our trip.
Yeah.
And then I guess plastic is really obvious when traveling. The amount of plastic everywhere, especially in London, they have such a coffee and like sandwich culture that there's just so much single-use plastic everywhere that people use items for literally a few minutes and just throw it out.
Yeah, that's actually bugged me every time I've gone to Europe or the UK, is just seeing how many people, because they have such efficient public transport and, you know, everything is so convenient. It's so easy on your way to work to just get a coffee to go and a sandwich at lunch or whatever. Whereas here, a lot of people pack lunches and they have coffee at home and we don't see as much of that. And I felt like, yes, there are places where they use biodegradable plastics and things like that, but those are mostly your vegan restaurants. And the big, busy coffee shops where people are buying wraps and sandwiches every single day, it's all just plastic, everything. Everything is wrapped in plastic. And it's 5 minutes, drink your coffee, eat your sandwich, throw the plastic away.
Yeah, it seemed really excessive to me. And for some reason, it just stuck out a lot more to me. I mean, maybe it was also the fact, like you've mentioned before, being on planes. The food that you get on a plane, it looks like you're left with as much stuff on your plate afterwards because everything is individually wrapped in little plastic bags.
Yeah, and that was one good thing on the flight down. They mentioned that they're trying to be more mindful of plastic and come up with solutions. And in the meantime, please kind of reuse your cups. So I was kind of impressed by that slightly, thinking, okay, at least they are making some kind of effort and they're not just completely ignoring the problem. But at the same time, I feel like it's a cop-out because there are some alternatives already and it's probably just too much of a cost outlay for them. So they don't give that much of a shit.
Yeah.
If it's going to cost them anything, then they're just going to be like, oh, please reuse your cup. And I looked around and everyone that I could see on the plane, aside from me, did not do that. So we've covered some of the rad and bad stuff from the UK. How does that differ from what you found in Hong Kong when you were there?
Yeah, so I went to Hong Kong for a month after the UK, and some of the rad stuff, I joined the Hong Kong Pig Save, which is, I guess, a chapter of the Save movement based in Hong Kong, and they don't only do vigils with pigs, but basically I joined them for a vigil outside of a pig slaughterhouse, which was really intense. I won't go through my whole experience, but I'm still working on writing a blog post, which we'll share on our social media. So you'll be able to read that soon if you want to. I was really impressed with the vegan community there. When I got there, I got added to vegan WhatsApp group, and they are doing stuff literally every week, like different forms of activism. Hong Kong it's a really tiny city, but it's still a jungle. So about 70% of it is jungle and natural area, and only 30% is city, where the people are concentrated. So I really enjoyed the fact that there are a lot of hikes and beaches close by. I was there over my birthday, and I decided to go on a solo hike, and I ended up getting kind of lost. But Hong Kong's not that big, and so it ended up being like a 16-kilometer hike. But it was definitely a highlight of my birthday. And on that hike, I saw this massive snake, which I'm pretty sure was either a Chinese or king cobra, reading afterwards, which are lethal.
Yeah, I'm glad you didn't die on your birthday.
Thank you for being glad I didn't die. But that was really cool. I came around this corner and there was this, I could feel, you know when you can feel like someone watching you? Mm. And I looked up and there was this huge snake. I'm estimating 2.5 meters maybe.
I think you probably exaggerated in your mind.
I did not. It was
after you realized that that was a lethal snake. He was massive.
The snake was massive. Yeah, but that was quite cool. I also got to eat a bunch of really good vegan food. I got to try the Beyond Burger, which is amazing.
So jealous.
It's incredible. It's really worth trying if you can try it. I went to a restaurant with some friends called So Boring. It was started out of the Occupy movement, and it's an anti-capitalist, pay what you want, vegetarian, majority vegan restaurant run by some cool people. It's just basically like, it looked like a garage in the side of this industrial building.
Amazing.
Like not in an area where there are other restaurants. So that was really cool. They just kind of keep bringing food out and you eat, and then at the end you can pay whatever you want to.
That's amazing.
So that was really cool. And then just before I left, I watched a talk by J.C. Reese at the Hong Kong Veg Society. So that was really interesting. And I have some thoughts on that. But and then there's a bunch of bad stuff. Hong Kong is not really my favorite place, to be honest. Not to shoot it down, but you like some places and don't like some places. I really don't like hot places. Even though I've traveled to quite a few, Hong Kong is extremely hot and humid. And I really struggled while I was there.
You're also just like a miserable shit a lot of the time.
Darren's right.
No, I'm joking.
I also found that, I mean, even though it's not worse, because in Western cultures it's just more hidden, there's animal cruelty everywhere. That's just really blatant and really difficult to see. From pet stores that have like these little buckets loaded full of turtles that are just climbing all over each other, to fish tanks full of massive fish packed where they can't even swim, to like crabs or lobsters that have their claws folded and tied over while they're alive, animals being slaughtered. It's just less hidden and in your face, and it's really difficult to see constantly. Also, Hong Kong is a like extremely materialistic, consumerist, ultra-capitalist place to be. I also find it's like really controlled. Like the police are very much present, and there's cameras everywhere. I don't know, it just made me really appreciate the freedom we have living in South Africa. One of the hardest things to see that I thought was pretty weird was that Hong Kong is a really wealthy country, but there are a lot of old people who seem homeless carting around a lot of stuff, whether it's cardboard or tins or anything like that. So I kind of looked this up, and so basically these old people are living on the streets, homeless, due to having no savings, no family support.
So do their families generally like abandon them, or what is the
kind
of reason for it?
I mean, I can't verify that as fact, but I was told that their families just can't support them anymore, and so put them out on the streets and they have to fend for themselves.
Can't or don't want to?
That's a good question. The Guardian has a good article on it called Hong Kong's Cardboard Grannies, which they've been nicknamed. So in there, they complain about the cost of living in Hong Kong that's going up constantly. And apparently 1/3 of Hong Kong's elderly live in poverty. So it's a lot of old people homeless and living on the street.
Yeah, that is like unbelievable.
And it's shitty because the Hong Kong government is really wealthy. They have a surplus, like a massive surplus. So it can be helped, and it's just not. On the vegan WhatsApp group that I was part of, someone posted that they needed help with getting photos of these orangutans in this mammal enclosure at the Hong Kong Zoological Gardens. So I went there and tried to take photos. You didn't have to pay for entrance, but it was a really difficult thing to see. And it's kind of hidden. You have to walk through these botanical and zoological gardens under this bridge, and eventually you get to this area where they're keeping all of these primates in these tiny enclosures. They look really depressed. It was really hard to witness, but I took some photos and sent it to them, so hopefully it helps. It's part of a campaign that they're doing to release the orangutans. So I also was a little annoyed about that. It seemed really single issue when literally every animal there looked...
Yeah.
Yeah, and then just like the UK, probably worse. The plastic in Hong Kong is on another level. Everything is in plastic, often double wrapped, like plastic within plastic. All of the shoes, shops that I went past, cling wrap the shoes.
What? Why?
I don't know, just so much plastic. But yeah, so that was some traveling that we did. So we'll put a bunch of the stuff we mentioned in our stories on Instagram. So follow us if you want to see some of what we got up to. Again, that's at Let's Rage Together podcast. So speaking of plastic, should we get onto the main topic?
Yes. So we decided to talk about plastic because it is quite an on-trend topic.
It is on trend.
Look at us being on trend.
So relevant.
Hashtag relevant. Is that a thing?
I don't know what the kids would use nowadays.
So yeah, we decided to talk about plastic because it is a pretty widespread problem everywhere. So we thought we'd just give our 2 cents and weigh in on it.
Yeah, I think most people are aware that plastic is bad.
Yeah, in a general sense.
Yeah, in this vague sense, but they aren't really sure why. And I feel like the majority of people still aren't willing to adjust their lifestyle. I mean, insert any topic here, it's probably the same.
Totally.
And I feel like being aware that plastic is bad without any action being attached to it is just useless.
Yeah. So firstly, why is plastic as a substance bad?
According to interestingengineering.com, we are producing 300 million tons of plastic a year. So half of that is thrown away minutes after using it.
Yeah.
And all the plastic that has been produced ever still exists.
Yeah. I mean, plastic will be around for thousands of years. And I think it's not inherently bad. It's a really useful substance. It's easy to sanitize. It's lightweight. It's got all these benefits. Even if you look at medical uses, when people say, let's just outright ban plastic, they're not thinking of hospital gloves and syringes and all of those things and all of the kind of sanitary benefits to plastic products. I think the main problem is the overuse of plastic in areas where we don't need to be using it, the overproduction, the pollution that comes from creating and disposing of plastic, even recycling. People often think, oh, well, I recycle, so it's fine. But what a lot of people don't realize is plastic generally can't just be recycled in the way that glass can or tin cans, because you can't take, for example, as far as I remember from what I've read, you can't take a plastic bottle and recycle it into another plastic bottle. It essentially gets downcycled. So the quality of the kind of molecular compound degrades with every kind of recycle. So you can only make lower quality plastics from those recycled materials, and you're releasing a whole lot of toxic chemicals into the environment by the actual recycling process.
Yeah, and the production of it. So essentially you can't even recycle plastic because it's not going to go anywhere. It's just, like you said, downcycling.
Yeah.
And plastic is in everything.
And aside from that, it's not biodegradable, or it's not going to break down the way that other substances do. A lot of people have even heard of things like microplastics, but they don't really understand what that means or why it's a bad thing. And the thing with plastic is the molecules themselves don't break up and biodegrade. So plastic that ends up in the ocean, for example, can photodegrade, but the molecules are not breaking up into other compounds. It's just becoming smaller and smaller pieces of plastic till it gets to the point of microplastics, which is essentially just a piece of plastic that is smaller than 5 millimeters.
Yeah, and essentially gets consumed by life in the ocean and can get small enough that even plankton can eat it. And then it just gets kind of absorbed into the ecosystem.
So it bioaccumulates up the food chain. So every animal that's eating plastic is then eaten by another animal who also eats plastic and the plastic in that animal. And if you're eating marine life, you're eating plastic without a doubt. So, maybe stop eating fish, firstly. But also just the amount of plastic we're producing, so much of it is just getting dumped into the ocean.
Yeah.
And I think this is where a lot of the panic comes from in single-use plastic and straws and bags and all of that. And those things are generally pretty easy to avoid. Like just take a reusable bag to the shop. It's really not difficult. There's so many things that you can do, but I feel like a lot of the emphasis is placed on the consumer. And you've mentioned this a few times before, that the responsibility always comes down to the consumer and making different choices. But we need to actually stop producing so much plastic.
I think it's bullshit that consumers, us, the environment, animals, have to be the ones paying for the problems with plastic and not the people producing it. They never feel the impact of what they produce.
And like we even said with things like airlines, they use a shitload of plastic every single day. There are other options, but it's too expensive.
Yeah, or just inconvenient.
Yeah, slightly inconvenient to them, slightly higher cost. So whatever, the environment can suffer.
I mean, you told me there's even plastic in tea bags.
Yeah, a lot of tea bags apparently have plastic in the actual bags. I would never have thought of that. I thought it was kind of a paper something or other.
Yeah.
But there's plastic in that. I mean, there's plastic in everything. It's crazy.
In everything. I mean, even for our health, we're ingesting microplastics, drinking bottled water. Basically, plastic is pretty shit. But this is kind of known by people, so I don't know how much we should actually go into plastic as a general thing. I think we do have some points about plastic we want to speak about, but there are some good documentaries like Plastic Ocean or Plastic Paradise.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of documentaries. They cover pretty much the same thing. A lot of them talk about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch and all of that. But some of the issues we wanted to raise is more, the things that people are not talking about or are talking about when it's not really getting to the root of the issue. So obviously, generally, using so much plastic is bad. Single-use plastic is bad. But we've seen a lot of emphasis placed on straws, for example. Yeah,
so recently, truthourdrought.com made this image comparing straws and fishing nets because according to the BBC and National Geographic...
And it was actually research that was recently done. I can't remember what journal it was in, but there was an article published in a journal.
Yeah, I mean, you can look this up yourself if you want. But apparently 46% of the plastic in the ocean is fishing nets. And the majority of the rest of the plastic in the ocean is fishing gear. So that includes ropes, oyster spacers, eel traps, crates, and baskets. And only 0.03% of the plastic in the ocean is straws.
Yeah, and I see so many non-vegans ranting about single-use plastic or saying like refuse straws or giving props to restaurants that have banned straws. And I'm like, you're missing the point entirely. Can you stop eating fish? Like there was even a local fish restaurant who posted all of these social media things and was basically like, please give us a high five for not using straws anymore or not using plastic straws anymore. And I'm thinking to myself, you are literally in the business of killing fish and you're worried about this tiny little bit of plastic that's also killing fish.
Yeah, so I think for people it isn't obvious that by consuming fish you contribute so much to plastic.
But even the irony of saying no to a plastic straw because you don't want to kill the poor fish that you're going to kill to eat.
Yes, exactly.
I mean...
So basically, if you stop eating fish, you are saving or you are not contributing to 46% plus of the plastic in the ocean versus stopping using straws, 0.03% of plastic in the ocean. So,
and I actually argued with a guy when I was doing outreach about this, and I said to him, almost half of the plastic in the ocean is from fishing nets, and he just completely disagreed with me. And I was like, it's just fact. And he was like, no. And he just flat out would not believe me.
I'll decide what my facts are. You can decide what your facts are.
Anyway.
So I found an article on Mail and Guardian that came out on the 5th of August. So this is well after this research has come out that 46% of the plastic in the ocean is from fishing nets and the majority of the rest is fishing gear. But to quote a part of it that made me really angry, could we just get rid of all plastic packaging? Sadly, no. Some of it is considered unavoidable. Plastic prolongs the life of produce. It provides a barrier to bacteria, a film to lock in protective gas, and a convenient waterproof layer. It would be difficult to imagine buying products like raw fish without it.
Oh,
And I just
so many face palms.
had to facepalm so hard. This is on the Mail and Guardian, and it has come out after this research.
So
Honestly.
let's try avoid plastic, but also we need plastic to cover the thing we're buying
Which
that
is
is firstly a
contributing.
dead animal and secondly contributing to all of this plastic.
Exactly.
Just eat a vegetable. Anyway, so speaking of the emphasis on all the single-use plastic, which if you can avoid single-use plastic, then do that. But there have been some concerns raised about these anti-straw campaigns.
Yeah, so there's a lot of talk about total bans of straws being ableist, which to me was surprising at first, and I think to a lot of people who don't know disabled people who actually need straws to function.
Yeah, at first I also was a bit shocked at that kind of accusation that it's ableist.
Yeah, and then I felt kind of, reading into it, I felt kind of ignorant because there are actually disabled people who need straws to survive, who cannot drink, whether because of problems with their mouths or their hands or like mental issues.
My kind of gut reaction or my instinctive response to the ableist comment was, but that's ridiculous because there are paper straws and reusable straws, silicone and glass and whatever. But I didn't actually think about how those straws are not suitable either.
Yeah, so if you haven't thought about this before, so for example, some of the alternatives, like Taryn mentioned, don't really work. Paper, for example, can disintegrate. Glass and metal straws don't bend and are difficult to move around.
Which I think would be a bit of a hazard in terms of injury.
Yes,
If
and
someone
they-
doesn't have full control, if they're unable to use their hands and they're relying solely on their tongue, for example, to move, I mean, I can imagine it would be quite easy to injure your mouth with
Yeah.
something so hard.
Also, people who have disabilities where they might bite down,
Yeah.
glass and metal won't work. Glass and metal also conduct heat. So if you're drinking hot drinks, those straws aren't going to work.
Yeah.
Paper will disintegrate in hot drinks. Some of the straws are sharp, like the metal straws, and can cut you. And some reusable straws are great, but they can cause hygiene problems for people who have specific health conditions where they need the straw to be single use and basically completely hypoallergenic each time and can't use a straw that's being washed and has the risk of not being completely clean. So
Yeah, a lot of those I hadn't really thought of, but I also think that as much as I don't want to say people are overreacting about this because I don't have a disability, so I can't say that this is not a big issue. I don't agree with a full ban of straws, but I do think that it should be removed entirely unless somebody needs it. So in my opinion, the kind of best compromise would be to have, I think maybe silicone straws would be a good option, or you get those metal ones with a silicone tip. But like you say, if some people still need the non-reusable plastic straws, I would say why not just have a few on hand and not make it a standard thing.
So you have straws available on request, but you don't just give them out with every drink.
Yeah.
And I thought the same, but also with straws only making up 0.03% of plastic in the ocean, I think it's not the plastic we should be focusing on. So I would rather that we aren't being dicks to disabled people than focusing so much attention on this really minuscule amount.
Yeah, I definitely think it's blown out of proportion, but I don't think there's anything wrong with realizing, okay, plastic is bad, let's look for alternatives, but be mindful of everyone. So I don't think it should get to the point where we say, well, straws is such a small thing, let's just forget about that and just keep producing straws. Let's have less of them available, but realize that it's not something we need to make massive campaigns about. Just stop providing them as a standard, have some on hand for the people who need them, and focus your energy on something that's actually meaningful, like making people go vegan.
Yeah, but businesses aren't going to do that. And like you just mentioned, campaigns, I think it is just that. It's such a token, nothing gesture
Of course.
for a business to say, hey, we aren't using straws anymore. Let's advertise this all over the place. And
Yeah,
people
give us
will-
your money to fund fishing.
Yeah, exactly. It's completely ridiculous.
Which
So-
again comes down to Rich's question as well about being more ethical and just being accountable for your own choices and knowing which sources of information to believe. Don't believe the fish restaurant telling you that they're ethical because they don't have straws. That's garbage.
yeah,
It's absolute garbage.
complete bullshit. The evidence is there now to disprove that.
Yeah, exactly. So don't believe those people, and also just be accountable for your actions. If you don't need a straw, don't use a straw. If you can reduce your plastic consumption, do that. But also please go vegan, because honestly.
So other than refusing straws and going vegan, what else do you think people can do to reduce plastic?
I think there's a lot of ways that we can just reduce single-use plastic and, like I said, be accountable for the small amount that the single-use stuff is contributing. So one interesting thing that I came across that I actually do is you'll find a lot of plastic that you almost can't avoid sometimes, like especially here in South Africa, if you don't have a whole lot of cash to go to the fancy health stores where you have fresh fruit and veg that isn't packaged and whatever, a lot of the plastic that we kind of can't avoid buying is not actually recyclable, which is infuriating. So firstly, refuse. If you can refuse any kind of plastic, do that. If you can't, try and recycle what you can, even though that's not ideal, it's better than nothing. But then for the plastics that you can't avoid that aren't recyclable, there's a really cool initiative called EcoBricks, where you essentially take a 2-liter cool drink bottle, an empty bottle, and you fill it with non-recyclable plastic. So your polystyrene, the kind of soft bags or cling wrap or those kind of things, and you fill it so that it's really densely packed and close the lid, and that can be used as a building brick, which they've used for like a lot of community projects. I've also seen in little community centers where they've built a little half pipe for kids to skate on out of this, so they just cover it with cement, so it takes away the cost and the need for actual bricks, and it's just donated plastic essentially. And it's a really strong, obviously long lasting, because that is the nature of plastic. And the way you can build this if you want to is you just take a bottle and you kind of cut up a lot of your non-recyclable plastic, like the polystyrene or the plastic punnets from strawberries or whatever, and you put all the soft stuff at the bottom so that it fills those little gaps at the bottom, and you just use like a wooden spoon or dowel stick or something to push it in and make it as compact as possible. And then every time you have plastic that you can't recycle, just cut it up, shove it in the bottle, push it down, and when it's full, then you can donate it to a place that uses them.
Oh, that's really interesting. I think I'm going to do that too. It's a really cool, simple thing to do. You know, it doesn't take up that much time. It's probably something all of us should be doing. How do you think we can avoid or reduce airline plastic or plastic in general while traveling?
I don't know, because I guess they're going to cater for everyone that's on there. The only way would be to really give them a heads up and say, please don't feed me on the plane. But then you got to take food anyway. And are they even going to let you? So I guess just putting pressure on them to find alternatives.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you're also flying in a plane, which is really
it's not exactly
destructive.
Maybe just don't fly. And then obviously the pretty basic things that most people do is buy a reusable water bottle, preferably not plastic, reusable mug.
You could use a spork.
Yeah, and then when you're going shopping for your veggies, if it's a place where a lot of shops here insist that you put your loose veggies in a plastic single-use, horribly flimsy bag so that they can put the price on it. So what I've done is I've just bought some kind of mesh fabric and sewed reusable bags. You can buy them as well, but that helps a lot.
Maybe we should also just end consumerism.
Yeah, that would be great.
I also have friends who would prefer, if they get food out, to actually eat at the restaurant versus getting takeout. Just because then you get a plate and cutlery that can be washed versus a bunch of packaging to throw away.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, as much as it's convenient to just get some takeout now and then when you're feeling lazy, it doesn't take that much more time to sit down there and eat at the restaurant or just cook at home.
The Mail and Guardian also had an article, Why Can't All Plastic Be Recycled? It's from actually from the same one I read with the ridiculous fish comment. But they suggest one solution to limit the types of plastic is to make it a single standard plastic so that it's easier to recycle versus having like all these different types of plastic. Just sounds like such an expensive mission to implement.
Yeah, I don't know how that would work because there's so many different types of plastic, from like your flimsy plastic bags to the hard plastic that's used for like computers and...
Yeah, and they mix plastic into things.
Yeah.
So like you get those Tetra Paks, and in 2016, I spent some time at this place called Sadhana Forest in India, and they had started buying roofing tiles made out of recycled Tetra Pak, which was really
That's cool.
Interesting to see. I also looked up if there were any alternatives to plastic. So I found a pretty interesting article on interestingengineering.com called How to Eliminate Plastic Waste and Plastic Pollution with Science and Engineering. And they say, right now there are viable alternatives to entirely replace plastics, while there are other recycling solutions to reduce the plastic which already exists. The science and technology is already prepared to eliminate plastic, although it will require extensive consideration and meticulous planning to change the way plastic is used and disposed of. Another part is humans are responsible for producing 300 million tons of plastic each year, half of which is used only once, then discarded. Of the millions of tons of plastic produced each year, only a fraction of it ever finds its way to a recycling plant.
This again, I think, comes down to people finding really good solutions, but most of the big corporations that are using most and producing most of the plastic are just not willing to change their technology and lay out that cost, because to them it's all about the bottom line.
Yeah, which is depressing because basically they're saying, hey, we can deal with this, but it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
They even say in one part of the article that recycling is nearly out of the question. Facilities are already struggling to keep up, and plastic can only be recycled so many times before it becomes too contaminated to the point of uselessness, which is like the point you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
One funny point as a side note was that they mentioned that even a Somalian terrorist group is allegedly banning plastic bags, and they've even banned their members from logging certain trees. So, which I thought was,
even the terrorists get it.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, for alternatives, they exist, but I just don't really see them being implemented.
Yeah, then Pete also found a really cool TED Talk on the economic injustice of plastic, which is really worth checking out. We'll leave a link to that in the show notes.
But yeah, basically the speaker, the gist of his talk is the connection of social justice issues, which is what we're all about, realizing the interconnectedness of everything. And the gist of his talk is that we basically don't actually have disposable anything, resources or people. So it's really worth checking out. The talk is called Van Jones, The Economic Injustice of Plastic. So check that out.
And then another reason why we wanted to talk about plastic today is because we also see it as an animal rights issue, which I think if you've listened to any of our episodes, you know that's something we're both very, very passionate about. And we watched a documentary in this regard called The Plastic Cow. And it's quite an old documentary, but it was pretty shocking. It's based in India, and they speak a lot about the plastic pollution there and the effects on some of the animals there. And one thing that really stuck out to me was they showed some of these cows that are literally starving, which is what happens to a lot of the marine life as well, because their stomachs get so full of plastic waste that they feel full, or they just cannot physically eat anything else because their stomach is just full of plastic. And they actually showed in the documentary an operation on one of the cows, and they took out literally kilograms of plastic from one cow.
Yeah, they filled buckets with plastic.
And you could see it took like 3 people to carry these buckets of plastic out of this cow's abdomen. You know, I mean, you often see footage of animals roaming around dump sites and things like that, eating what they can find. And it's never really occurred to me, like, how much plastic are these animals eating? And that goes for birds and marine life as well, that they're just ingesting plastic because they're mistaking it for food, or there's just so much plastic in and on everything that it's unavoidable for a lot of them.
Yeah, according to National Geographic, an estimated 100,000 marine animals are strangled, suffocated, or injured by plastics every year. And so when you start talking about animal rights and veganism, it makes me question why we concentrate so much on farm animals. Like, I understand they're important, but all life came from the ocean. All life depends on the ocean. If farm animals disappear, we will be okay. Not to be harsh, but we will be. If ocean life disappears, if we have fishless oceans, we are fucked.
Yeah.
And so why is this not a bigger issue that we are speaking about as an animal rights issue?
I feel like a lot of animal rights activists completely still ignore marine life, which is such an injustice in itself. I mean, aside from the ethics that obviously all of the animals are important and we don't want to exploit or use or abuse any of them, just from like an environmental perspective, you cannot ignore the oceans.
You cannot.
Yeah. If
the oceans die, we die. It's quite simple. If I have to think about all of this in summary, I feel like most of the things people in power are doing and what we as a society are doing are really nothing more than futile gestures to make it seem like we give a shit. And when industry and economy is really all that's mattered. We really need fundamental radical changes in the ways that we live and interact in the world. And I actually found it really depressing doing research for this episode because we would find out one issue with plastic, and then we would just watch another video or read another article when it's like, oh, but have you thought about this thing? And basically it just seems like we are just fucked.
Yeah, even the videos and stuff that we found where people were talking about these amazing solutions they have to recycling and plastic pollution and cleaning up really impoverished areas that are full of plastic, and so much of it was just such obvious corporate bullshit.
Yeah.
Like, look at this amazing like social initiative we have, when actually they're just exploiting local people to clean up plastic so that they can make money off of the recycling. It's just such empty promises and like grabbing at straws to fix something that is so well beyond being fixed.
Grabbing at straws. Yeah, I mean,
didn't even plan that.
The one guy was talking about how our initiative's so great, even Shell invested.
Oh yeah.
Like one of the worst fucking companies on earth. But, you know, like knowing this, you know, you get to the stage where you have to decide, like, am I going to be active about it, or am I just going to become nihilistic and do nothing? And I struggle with that, you know, like doing all this research and realizing, oh, we just fucked. What can you do? Like, how do you get past this and actually not be just a dejected nihilist and actually care and do something?
I feel like, again, this ties in really nicely with Richard's question about being more ethical, even when you realize that things are so much bigger than you can possibly have an impact on. But I feel like we all have a moral responsibility, despite how fucked things are and how meaningless our actions might be and how meaningless consumer-driven changes might be. These kind of initiatives that we have can only really serve as a spark for education and accountability, and, you know, enabling people to become more aware of these issues so that we can put pressure on corporations and governments for top-down solutions. Not that we should ever rely on governments or corporations for solutions, because let's face it, they don't give a shit about us.
They don't.
But, you know, to put pressure on them to make the changes that they need to, and to essentially dismantle capitalist exploitation.
That is the issue. I think dismantling capitalism will solve a lot of problems.
Yeah.
Which is not going to be an easy thing. So,
no, but I guess we have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And if we know that something we're contributing to is even a fraction of the problem, let's address that.
So basically do what we can, where we can, with what we have.
Yeah, I think that's the moral of today's story.
So thanks for listening to this episode.
Yeah, thanks for listening, and hopefully you got something out of it. If you have any thoughts on anything we've discussed today, please send us an email. letsragetogetherpodcast@gmail.com.
Or contact us via our social media accounts at Let's Rage Together Podcast.
Also, just a reminder about our Patreon, and we also have a PayPal option to help us out if you want to do that just once off. But if you don't want to or can't help us out through Patreon or PayPal, then even just a review on iTunes would help us a lot, or sharing an episode or one of our posts with your friends who you think might be interested in the podcast would go a long way.
Yeah. And again, our email address is letsragetogetherpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Love and liberation.
In plastic watering can for a fake Chinese rice.